Welcome to GBIRL, the podcast looking at the real business world of esports, gaming, and streaming with the people and personalities behind it all. Here is your host, Bill the Conqueror.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the GBIRL podcast. You know, I have interviewed casters before, and I felt like it was time to revisit it because I think casting is one of those jobs that everyone should do. Just like you should be a server, waitress, waiter for at least 6 months of your life. You should be a sports official for 2 or 3 seasons. You should also be a caster for several seasons because it's one of those jobs that people see you and they look at you and they think they can do your job until they have to do it. So I ran into this gentleman on Twitter. Spaceman, thank you for making time for me today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. I love that intro. That was I've actually never thought about it that way. That's very true. Yeah, everyone should try this at some point. So
you know, I can honestly say I tried casting like very casually a couple times for some events that I was part of a group and we were trying to put on events. I said, you know, I'll give it a shot. Being entertaining off the cuff, off the top of your head for 20 minutes is hard. It's hard to do.
It is.
It's pretty hard to do. So
it is.
So before we get too deep into the actual what being a caster is like, sort of talk about yourself a little bit.
Sure.
You know, how you decided to get started into casting. What was your first big experience? Things like that. Go ahead.
Sure. So when I first started, when I think I was around like 13, 14. At the time, I just was able to get my first real console, and you know, I grew up in a household that was very traditional, low middle income, very middle class. You know, my parents work really hard, still do, and gaming was a luxury that I got to partake in when I got a little bit older. Saved up money from like cutting yards and stuff like that. Bought a console, bought Halo, played it a bunch, but then really started to like Call of Duty. I was like 13, 14, competitive Call of Duty on the MLG circuit started to go on TV and started to go on this thing called Justin TV, which turned into Twitch.
Yep.
And it was exciting, but at the time, there was really no roadmap. So if you wanted to be a pro, you kind of had to either focus on that while doing high school or school and then drop out and become a pro. But when I was like 13, 14, I kind of realized like I don't have time to commit to this. So I want to be involved in esports, in Call of Duty esports some way, just not as a player. I don't know what I want to do yet, but I want to do it some way. And then I very quickly learned when I turned 14 that casting was fun and I liked doing it. So from there, it's been a very long journey. But yeah, I learned early on that I'm not good enough to compete, don't have the drive, and I'm going to do something else. So I was blessed to know that early.
So it seems seems like to me that everybody in their life has one moment when it happens and they realize, this, I want this. This is what I want the most. So for you, what was that moment where you're like, holy crap, I want this. I want this directly shot into my veins 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So what was that for you?
You know, that's a good question. I think it was maybe like a collective like epiphany. It was more of like I had a love for it, and I was watching the esports and enjoying it, and it was obviously an escape from my normal life and being able to appreciate it.
Sure.
But when I think it was the moment I think it was Puckett and Benson. They were working as a casting duo together in one of these events, and the minute I saw that, I didn't know, you know, what's point A, B, C, D all the way through G. What does that look like in the industry? But I knew that if someone is commentating this and there's a stream, business is booming somewhere. Yeah. So that means that these people are being paid, which means that they are currently living in that esports lifestyle. And I think that when I realized that, and then I realized I don't know how I'm going to get into esports, but I know that I want to do that. I think once I saw that casters actually existed, that's when I realized that the business is self-sustaining to where this could be a viable job. And I didn't know how I was going to get there, but just that it existed. So I think that's when I realized, like, okay, this is what I want, like, full time.
So was there anybody outside of gaming that whether it was football, baseball, basketball, whatever the sport, that you watched when you started and maybe still watch right now for maybe some like tips and tricks?
Yeah, so like for like inspiration and stuff like that, for sure. Like I I played baseball since I was 3. I played all the way through college. Like at the time, it was a big part of my life. So I didn't want to like, even though I probably wouldn't have been pro, I didn't want to commit like, all my time to gaming and then miss out on being able to play sports, what I love doing. But at the time, I think, rest in peace, Kobe Bryant was like one of the big people I used to watch to get motivated, and someone who I looked up to for like tips and tricks, like, be about the passion, learn how to grind, learn how to put in the work necessary to do what you need to do, take every day as if you have to restart from scratch. When it came to baseball, I think the biggest thing, even though I wasn't a Yankees fan, Derek Jeter was kind of the big one.
Okay.
Nationals didn't really have anyone at the time, but yeah, it was kind of just like looking at superstars, looking at their work ethic,
Right.
and saying, okay, like, not that I'm expecting to be the number one in the field that I want to be in, but how do they approach every day? Because if I can approach it the same way, surely it'll pay off. So yeah, like looking at what they were working with and just looking at, what they would talk about, getting up every day with the same goal, and focusing that it's not about the end of the ladder, but it's about climbing the rungs appropriately and doing what you got to do. So that was just kind of the big motivator there.
Okay. So for you, it's the stage of your career, and let's just say this up front, that you and I were supposed to have this conversation last weekend at the time of this recording, but you said,
Yeah.
"Oh, I can't. I'm doing RLCS work right now." So I'm like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, that's way more important than anything I have to say." But I mean, you didn't just wake up one day and you're calling matches in the Call of Duty League, and you're not
Right.
doing high end Rocket League stuff. So,
Right.
so obviously you started somewhere and you worked your way up, and obviously along the way you caught breaks, you got in front of the right people. So
Sure.
so talk to me about what you do now versus what you did even 6 months ago, 12 months ago. You know what I'm saying?
No, for sure. No, it's a great question. So I think the big thing is that when you become like, I'm not like I wouldn't say like I'm obviously like a top tier professional yet. Like I'm not like a golden boy or
Okay.
a puckhead or maven, because those are their own levels. Those are people who,
Right.
not only just skill wise, but and talent wise, but professionally, they are on all the time. So I'm basically on the precipice between that, getting to that level and still just keeping the same grind as I've had since I started. But to kind of get back to the question, yeah, like when you're first starting, a lot of it is very much, how do I get involved? And less focused on the talent yet, because you haven't molded that yet. It's like
Okay.
kind of like a lump of clay, right? You haven't molded it, but you're trying to figure out, okay, where do I go? What's the avenue I need to get into to where I can figure out the path forward, and where I can start putting the skills I think I have to the table, and then working from the ground up. Now that I'm here and I've been doing this for 7 to 8 years now, that I've been doing for this long, it's less of a mental focus about, okay, where's the avenue? Like it's like in the beginning, you're thrown into like a swimming pool, and you don't know where the lanes are, you don't know where any of the currents are.
Right.
So you're trying to figure out where's the lane, and then I'll learn how to swim. For me now, it's very much, I know where the lanes are and I'm swimming, but now I'm working on perfecting the strokes and stuff like that. So it's very much like I have the same work ethic and drive that I had back then,
Right.
but it's the same exact thing I had when I first started, but I'm much wiser and more in tune with the industry at this point. And that experience basically just means I know how to dip and dive out of certain currents in the water, to where, is this good for my career? Yes, I'm going to keep moving. Do I need to go to this part of the pool if I need to advance certain aspects? No. Am I okay with my skill at this point? Yes. Okay, then let's go to something else. So it's just about knowing where to go, rather than trying to find your path forward than when you just start. So
Okay, so finding your path forward, that's a good place for this question, I think. So regardless of your career, whoever you choose
Yep.
to be, as an umpire, I've dealt with this myself early in my career. when somebody that you might look up to, or somebody more experienced than you, gives you that first major reality check of criticism. Hey, you want to be good, young man? You got to do these 3 things, because right now you suck at these 3 things. So it doesn't matter who you are. You could be somebody who's somebody who builds houses. You could be somebody that writes code. You could be somebody who's a caster like yourself. So talk to me about that first time somebody you respected, somebody more experienced, just came and whacked you on the head with some criticism.
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, so I think the first time that it really happened was, um, it was actually, so it was a peer of mine, but at the time,
Mm-hmm.
um, I had been doing casting for about 4 years, and I did
Mm-hmm.
one of my, at the time, bigger events. It was like a local land, about like 200 teams. It's called MES. It's in Detroit,
Okay.
and I went and worked, and I worked with a kid, who ended up being a co-caster for a while, and now he works for the CDL. A guy named Paradox, who is our lead observer currently. But he's a great caster, and at the time, he was much higher up on the rung than I was. He had done
Mm-hmm.
some pro events, stuff like that, and I got the chance to work with him at this event. And I had been essentially, my whole routine was practice, 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 look at what I'm like, rewatch my VOD, go over it again, and then watch the pros, watch how they break down sentences, what kind of cadence do they use, what do they talk about in specific areas, how much
Right.
knowledge are they bringing, et cetera, et cetera. So all that stuff. So I kind of was just kind of self-teaching myself. So I went in,
Mm-hmm.
and when I worked with him, it was great. It was wonderful. But I said, like, when I was done, I said, just mentally, I know that obviously I need to ask for criticism, but obviously anything I get, it's going to suck, but it's going to make me be better. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
end goal. Right. So I went into him and I said, hey, like, we just did our last series over the weekend, blah, blah, blah. Can you tell me, if there's anything that stuck out to you that I did wrong? Could you tell me what you would like to see me work on moving forward so that I know? And just being kind of open like that. And Quentin was very, very easy to talk to and very open. He was like, yeah, for sure. Like, work on your cadence. The game, but work on presenting it. Don't tell the audience, like, or don't show the audience and don't really tell them, but try to bring them into the fold. Like, you don't have to be so blatant with your statements. Like, the audience can see the screen, they know what's going on, so figure out a way to storytell rather than just saying exactly what's happening. So he gave me very kind criticism, but in a way where I was like, okay, like, I can really work with this. I didn't really get hit over the head with it.
Okay.
And I've been hit over the head with some criticism before, but not in a
Right.
bad way. Like, hey, like, you need to work on this, which I love for sure. But the
Okay.
first time I really got it, it was very much like, hey, like, these are the things that we look for that most talent should have, so work on that. So yeah, that's like the first time I really got real kind of criticism. It was like a little tap on the head, but I
Mm-hmm.
ran with that. And I love getting criticism. It's one of my favorite things because it just means that if I can tackle that, then
Yeah.
they can't say that the next time, and then I just
Right.
work on the next thing. So yeah, that's
Okay.
where I go.
So has any other caster, any other person in production, anybody who may have hired you or not hired you, have they ever done or said anything that has made you question your a career path? Like they've done something maybe out of line, or they said something and you took it a certain way, and you're like, why the hell am I doing this right now? You know what I'm saying?
I don't think so. I don't think I've run into anything in terms of like, I don't think whether it's like they said something abstract, whether it's about the game or something about the environment or whatever. Like,
Right.
I think one of the cool things about the games that I do and just kind of the people that I've worked with is that when you work, whether regardless of the level you're working at, but when you're working with, some of the people from Esports Engine who I work with a lot, who ran a lot of the COD events, or when I worked at Gears of War, and now when I work with Rocket League, and I worked with Tashi and the 343 team at Halo, all these people, you'll find that there are a lot of toxic fans and individuals in esports, but that's in like every sport, every
Right.
kind of entertainment.
Right.
But the people behind the scenes are very, very down to earth. They're very, very kind and
Okay.
open and welcoming. So I haven't run into anything, whether it's like a production or like an assistant saying something crazy. I also don't think I've run into anything like personal. I also have been very blessed with not being yelled at by someone from production, or like
Okay.
maybe someone will come over and be like, hey, like, if you're pushing the boundary too much with something you say on stream, they'll be like, hey, like, you can't say that. We need you to tone it down. But other than that,
Okay.
everyone I've worked with has been very, very nice. So I'm grateful for that.
Nice. Okay. I think that's. I honestly think that is important to highlight, because there's this perception that gaming is just full of jerks and people are mean
Hmm.
to each other constantly. And I, you know, I know from my experience in life, there are, regardless of what you do, there are people who come off as mean, people that rub you the wrong way, you rub them the wrong way, you don't get along with them, but sometimes you just have to work together, and sometimes you just have to get along, but most of the time people are all kind of working towards the same goal of,
Exactly.
we just want this event to be good, we want people to like it, we can, what did we do good, what did we do well, and I think that that's very important to bring out, is that there are a ton of great people out there, a ton of great people, passionate people that want to make this work. Okay, so you've been doing this now, you said, for about 7 years.
Mm.
Is this now becoming, or I guess a better way to put this, from where you started to where you are now, is this something that you could see maybe soon turning into something that isn't just a contract gig where you show up for a couple of
Mm.
dates and you do some things, whereas you've reached a point where this is actually viable full-time stuff?
Yeah, I definitely think that as of late that it's getting to that point.
Okay.
It look like with currently everything that's going on the planet, it's been an interesting year. It's been an interesting time for a lot of for emails and conversations I've had with whether it be my producers or
Hmm.
just leagues that I'm in talks with. I think again some of the issues that talent, if you don't have an agency, if you don't have someone backing you up, it is kind of difficult to navigate that.
Okay.
So I have had to figure out, where's my next step since I'm the only one vouching for me at this point.
Okay.
But I've been doing this long enough, and I don't usually give myself credit for a lot of things because it all goes into the process and it keeps me going. But I will give myself some leeway here where I have done a decent amount of games and I've
Right.
done a decent amount of high level of gigs. So it's definitely it's gotten to a point where I'm now making, I'm making a good amount of money.
Hmm.
I made my first paycheck like ever, I think like a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago,
Okay.
and I had been casting up until then for about 6 years. So
Okay.
it's starting to get to a point where now I'm making some money. We're getting to the point where we might be looking at moving to full time. But yeah, it just kind of takes a while. For everyone's different, but yeah, I definitely think that I've tried to navigate this whole COVID-19 situation the best that I can, and it's so far so good. So far it's working out, but sometimes it just takes a bit to get going.
Okay. And I like what you said there, is that you worked a long time and you really didn't get your first paycheck until about, I think you said almost 2 years ago, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
In 2018, I got my first paycheck.
Okay,
Yep.
so 2018 you got your first paycheck. You said you've been doing this for 7 years. So for
Hmm.
5 years, you worked for free.
Yep.
And so in that 5 years, you're making connections, you're constantly outreach, you're trying to figure out ways, you're practicing, you're working, you're reading, you're doing all the things that you need to do. On
Yep.
top of that, you're also working a job, trying to feed yourself, house yourself,
Right.
that whole business. So
Yeah.
what were those first, I guess, 3 or 4 steps that you took when you started working on your own? Of, I need to do these things so that if that I need to get myself out in front of people. So I guess
Mhm.
sort of walk me through that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. So this is the kind of the advice I give. Obviously, I can't go super in depth with young talent when they ask me like if I get a DM and they say, "Hey, like, how can I get started?" Like everyone's journey is different.
Right.
So one of the big things I tell a lot of people, and I had the discussion with a coach last night who was getting a job in the CDL, and we were talking about the some of the mindsets of amateurs coming up and how everything's
Right.
working. But the thing I tell anybody who's aspiring to cast or anyone who's just aspiring to like play the game, the biggest thing I say is, look, like everyone's ladder to the top is different. And
Okay.
I have never met anyone except for one person whose ladder was a complete climb up, like straight three, 4 rungs, climb straight up and you're good. You're at the top.
Right.
So you have to understand that like everything you're going to either have to work laterally and work around going straight up to the top, or you're going to have to just say, okay, roll with the punches, and everything that comes at you, that's part of your journey. So number one is just kind of understanding like you can't expect to make in and break it or go all the way just because you saw someone else do it. So
Right.
that's like the big thing, and that kind of discourages people. But I try to tell them like that's who everyone has to go through this. But the
Right.
biggest thing I did was when I first started, I was commentating over friends. Like there was this thing called Money Eights of the day back in the day, or like we would play eights lobbies where it's 4v4 how it used to be, and it's like playing competitive. And if I wasn't playing, I would sit out and I would spectate and I would just commentate the game. So
Hmm.
that was the first thing I did, is just get myself familiar with the idea of commentating, commentate the game. Then I would record myself commentating, upload it to YouTube. Didn't get any views, but it was good to at least have that there so
Hmm.
that I could either go rewatch it or I could have record of when I started. The next thing I did is keep commentating, and then when I would work my way up amateur players and like I would play with more people in the scene at the time because the scene was much smaller, I would ask to like sit in, I would ask to spectate, I would ask to just quietly commentate to myself. And then when I could start recording videos, or I could start reaching out to some like people and being like, hey, if you're playing in a tournament later, is it cool if I just come in and just spectate, and I'll commentate to myself. I'll commentate to my recording device. So I would do that for a while. And then I would reach out and be like, hey, like I have clips of me casting or this or that. And a lot of it was just, hey, like some random person or some random organization online is throwing like a tournament together for either free or for like, I don't know, $50 at the end. And it's like, hey, like, I would just like to commentate over it. So that was just kind of what I did for like, I would say the first 2 years, 2 years, 3 years. And then it started getting to the point where I downloaded Twitter and I started getting on Twitter, and then realizing there's like sometimes there's local events that currently happen. And it pushed me to the point where I would just keep commentating stuff online when I could. I would commentate, and I would commentate to myself. And then there was an event posting on Twitter that was in New Jersey, and I currently live in Maryland in the East Coast. So I was like, okay, they're looking for a caster, and I would send over what I had. Not great quality stuff, but I was like, hey, like I've been commentating for a couple years now, and here's what I have. I would like to do something where I can actually have a real mic, a real camera, and an ability to cast over people who are playing the game correctly. Like, let me know if you want me to work. So a lot of it really is just getting started. Like if you're coming up, commentate over your friends, record yourself practicing. You can even go to a professional match, mute the audio, and then record yourself over that and post it to Twitter. And it's like the ecosystem right now is much larger than back when I started. So I tell people that as well. I say you have access to Twitter and an entire ecosystem of amateur talent and amateur scouts and all kinds of eyeballs that did not exist back in 2013 and 14. So I tell them to record themselves and put it online, and just keep doing that and asking people, hey, do you need a commentator? Hey, you're running a $20 league. Can I commentate a game or two? Just find a way to get yourself involved, and don't be afraid to DM, because everyone's afraid to email. Everyone's afraid to DM. They don't want to bother anyone. And I was never afraid of that. And that's one of the reasons I'm currently where I'm at, is because I didn't care. Like I would DM and email whoever I wanted, because that just seemed like the way to go. So you just kind of have to do it.
Right. I think that the last point right there speaks to something that for anyone that's ever taken sales training, you want to get to the no as fast as possible. Why? So you can move on to the next one.
Exactly.
You either want them to say yes or no, because if they say they're not sure, that's just keeping you hanging on. When you just either look, if the answer is no, the answer is no. Just move forward, move on. Now, for somebody starting out right now, so is it best to focus on one game, one specific game, or one genre of game? So like, for example, so would it be better for somebody to just focus on Warzone, for example, or to focus on the battle royal genre? Because yes, there are differences between Warzone and PUBG and Apex Legends, but the genre is technically the same. The same concepts that work in Warzone also work for PUBG. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm gonna cannibalize your second point. No, so
Okay.
I agree with you, and here's where I'll extend it. Instead of what I would say is, instead of saying like, okay, should we go for one game or the genre, I would say, this is how I did. I basically went, do I go for one game or do I go for just any game? So whether it be you want to tackle the genre itself or whether you want to tackle the other games that exist, I think that idea is correct, and I agree with you there. So this is where I went. When I started, it was one game. It was very one focused, and I wanted to do Call of Duty and Call of Duty only. And that's because I didn't want to be known. It's not that I didn't want to be known for anything else, but I wanted to do Call of Duty and be known as the Call of Duty guy and do that. And that I didn't want to be doing another game and think, people will think, oh, I'm not committed to the game I like, or, oh, I'm no longer that guy because I'm doing something else. And I felt that it kind of tarnished my image for some messed up reason. That's what I thought. So for a couple of years, I was doing Call of Duty only. And it wasn't until like 2017, so recently, when eventually I was just doing COD, and Call of Duty is a notoriously hard game to break into as a top talent. If you're not better than the talent they have, and they don't rotate talent that often,
Right.
you won't get in to the top. And it's not a bad thing. It's just the way it is. It's an entertainment business, first of all. And second of all, the caliber of talent they have at the top is unbelievable. And that goes for any major esport. Most major esports are incredibly hard to become a major talent for. So I was doing COD, and it felt like after a while, I was just kind of railing my head into a wall. And I was like, I'm not going anywhere. I've done countless amateur events in person. I've done hundreds of online matches. I've done tens of hundreds of online events. Like, I've done so much stuff with this, and I feel like I'm not moving anywhere.
Okay.
And I remember I reached out to Golden Boy at the time, who I had connections with before, but he was supposed to be doing an event I was doing, and he ended up having to do something else. But I reached out to him and I said, I think there was at one point he said, like, do you want to be a great Call of Duty commentator, or do you want to be a great commentator?
Okay.
And for some reason it hit me, and I was like, I want to be a great commentator in general. Like, that's what I want to be. He's like, you just need to figure out where you want to go. And then that led me to eventually, long story short, there was a posting at one point during the year on Twitter where MLG tweeted out, they're like, hey, we have a Gears of War event and we need a comment. Like, we're looking to take up like a commentator. You record yourself, send it in, we'll pick a winner, and you come out and do the event, assuming you're in the area, and you go do the event. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll look at that. Like, it might give me a chance to build my brand. It might give me a chance to, build up my name and get some reps somewhere else.
Right.
And so, long story short, I ended up doing it, and we might get into that later. But the big thing I tell most new talent, sorry for rambling, the big thing I tell most new talent is essentially, when you're starting out, always start with one game. Start with one game for the first maybe 2-3 years, because it's important to build the skills. You may not be the best caster when you're done, but building the skills of knowing how to commentate a game are far more important than doing everything under the sun. Once you build those skills after 2 or 3 years, and you have a solid foundation of being actually able to do the craft that is commentate, right, then expand if you're not going anywhere. If you're not jumping into the tier 1 scene immediately into your esport, once you've done 2 or 3 years of that work, then start branching out to other games, because then you get more exposure, you get other audiences on you, et cetera, et cetera. So I tell people, always start with one and then move to more, but you always should find a foundation first, and that's the most important part.
Okay, and I think that's important for people to know, is because the way gaming is very tribal. If you're a first-person shooter player,
right?
For people who play COD don't have a ton of friends who play fighting games. That's just how it is. It isn't that they hate people that play fighting. It's just they hang out with their friends who also play COD. And so there's like a built-in kind of unassuming, I guess, loyalty that that you might feel like, wow, I've spent 3 years working my way into this community, and now I'm gonna go do something like 180 degrees away from that. I mean, is that something I want to do? It's a new thing, and for people starting out, like you said, you get a foundation. You start to feel safe. You start, okay, yeah, the game makes sense to me. I can understand flows. I can understand strategy. But then, if you go from COD,
right.
So, like yourself, you go from COD to Rocket League. So 2 pretty different games. I mean, every game feels different, but when you're talking COD and Rocket League, they're like totally different
games.
They're
totally different.
Right.
Yeah.
So for some people, they just might not feel very safe doing that. And so I guess my next question is, when you made that jump from COD to Rocket League, when you're just like, yeah, he's right. I want to be a good commentator, not a COD commentator, but I want to try something new. So when you made that jump and you decided Rocket League, what was behind that?
So a lot of it was, first and foremost, I feel like there's a big thing to also understand, is that for like a lot of young talent, like most of them will get into games they love, but I also stress, like, you need to love the game you're doing. And there have been times where I was offered a job, or I was offered a position for like a major esport, and not that like it was at the major level, but it was like, hey, like, we have this opportunity you could take. They would get you in the door, or an opportunity that would, pay you some money, and you could do the game and possibly do more with it. And I said no, because at like even now I think it was the right decision because I just didn't. It's not that I hated the game. I enjoyed it. I liked it, but I didn't have that love that when I was commentating it. I just didn't like it. Like it was something that felt like any game that I approached, whether it was Call of Duty, then I moved to Gears of War, then I did
Mhm.
Halo, and then I did a Fortnite event, then I did Apex, and now I do Rocket League, and I've done like Smash in between. But every game that I do, I have to be able to love it in the moment when I'm casting it, even if
Okay.
it's even if it's a boring match. There's something about a game you kind of feel it. You're like, I love what I'm doing right now. I didn't have it with that game that I got offered, so I said no. So that's the big thing really is kind of loving what you do. So with Rocket League, I had played the games. It dropped in like 2015. I had played it, casually with friends. I knew the game already and I was a fan of it. So I already loved being able to have the idea of working in it. But Rocket League actually didn't come around till it was early. It was early last year. It was around this time last year. I had reached out to one of the Rocket League, one of my managers who was at the time she works or now she works for a different company, but at the time she was the talent manager. Her name's Gillyweed. I reached out to her and I said, hey, like, I was told to reach out to you from a specific person because I had reached out to James Bott, who's one of the analysts, and I was like, hey, like, how do I get involved? I'm not looking to jump into where you guys are. Clearly, I'm asking, like, is there a place on the ground I can start? How do I get myself involved? Because I want to take this seriously. And he said, reach out to her, reached out to her, said, hey, like, I'd love to be able to know how I can get involved, this, that. And at the time, she's like, sure, like, we'll talk about things we might have coming on the horizon where you could possibly talk to us. And she offered me a job at one point to fly out and do and host one of their shows because they needed a host at the time,
Right.
host for the weekend. So even if you don't know the game in terms of understanding the metas the pros play, you can host and do that.
Yeah.
And at the time, I couldn't do it because I had my friend's wedding that weekend, and I had to unfortunately say no. And it was stressful, but eventually she got back to me and said, hey, I submitted a reel for Rocket League, and it wasn't a great reel at that. Like, I look back and I'm like, oh my God. But I submitted a reel at the time, and she got back to me about a month or two later after I said no to that thing. And she was like, hey, by the way, like, there's this rival series. You have the professional level, which is the RLCS, and you have the rival series, which is in the same studio, but it's for the teams that are coming up. And that's where a lot of the pros came through. And she's like, we need another commentator for it. It's a long gig. Would you like to do it? So the immediately I was excited to get a new job, but the biggest scary thing was it is very different from every other shooter that I've done. Clearly,
Yeah.
Rocket League is its own thing. And so this is another piece of advice that I give people is when I jumped into this, I don't just jump in when I do a new game. I don't just jump in and cast it the same way. I don't just jump in and cast it the way I want to. What I do for every single game, and this was especially relevant with Rocket League because it's so unique. And people think, oh, it's soccer, so just cast it like a soccer game. But every game has its own signature.
Right.
Every game has its own frequency.
Right.
Every game has its own resonance pattern that you have to reach. And so what I do is every game I'm jumping into for the first time, even if I play the game like Halo, I had played Halo for a decade. I know what the pros do. I know how they play. But even Halo commentary is not just simply saying what's happening. So every game that I learned, I would go and watch the streams. I would listen. How are the casters approaching it? What kind of cadence do they use? What's the vocabulary like? What do they talk about? Is there a flow pattern between saying what's happening and the analysis? What's the resonance of the casting style? Like, casting is very much an art form. It's a craft, and it's very much about like taking a jigsaw puzzle and putting the pieces in appropriately and knowing where to put the pieces. So with Rocket League, I was extremely stressed out because every time I'll learn a game, I'll learn how to cast it, and then I'll insert my personality in, and that's how I do it. But with Rocket League, I was focusing on how do the casters approach it, because I'm not just going to come in and do my own thing. I want to know what's kind of the common denominator for most of the cast. What is it, whether it's the cadence, whether it's the vocabulary about the game they talk about, whether it's the resonance pattern, the frequency of the diction, the just like all that stuff, all the stuff that goes into the vocals and the performance of casting. How is that in Rocket League? So I went in, I studied that, and then as I got smoother and smoother and got more confident in my abilities during the rival series, I would interject my personality here and there, and now that has catapulted me from the rival series to now doing RLCS. So it was scary. Right. It was honestly like very stressful because I didn't know how I was going to do. Casting a game like soccer, even though it's a video game, is still kind of stressful because there's something about Rocket League that's very chaotic, but you also have to know how to slow it down. And when the slow moments are happening, how do you build a story? So I tell casters all the time, no matter what game you're doing, learn the resonance pattern and the frequency of the casting in the game. Learn what it sounds like, not just how you're speaking it. You need to understand each game has its own wavelength and it focuses on that. So if you reach that, you'll be fine. But if you come in and you do your own thing, it can be very jarring to the viewer. So you need to know how to be able to approach that. So that's what I focus on when I went into Rocket League.
There's a really interesting phrasing you said there, cadence, and it's resonant frequency. That's a really good term. I'd love to see that used more often in esports. That every game has its own resonance frequency. Every game has its own vibe. So a lot of what you do, and I only know this because I've spoken with friends who have casted off stream, is that a lot of what you do is sort of it's very off the cuff, and you always have somebody who's in your ear. Hey, we're going here next, or hey, something happened and we have to delay for another 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and so you're always processing information very quickly. So what are some tips that you can give people as to when it comes to thinking on your feet? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. I think number one thing is be comfortable talking to a camera, and that scares a lot of people. But when I'm casting or when I'm looking at the camera, first of all, when I'm looking at the camera, I'm not looking at the viewers. I feel like I'm looking at myself, like if I was in a mirror and I had to put a show on for myself. That's where I look. And when I'm casting, one of the things that people don't realize is that casters hear what they say in real time. I know it sounds really stupid to say out loud, but whenever I'm speaking, I am hearing, when I'm forming the sentence in my head and saying it in real time, I'm hearing what I'm saying and going, am I making sense right now? Is this exactly what I'm supposed to be saying? Like it's like a computer that's supposed to be reading back the information. So most casters I've talked to have felt that same sentiment where we're like, whenever we're speaking out loud, we are self-processing our sentences to make sure they make sense. And that's why, like, sometimes we'll slip up and a word will just spit out and we have to self-correct later. But the big thing I tell people, other than just being comfortable speaking to a camera and getting comfortable speaking out loud, is one, learn how to freestyle. If you're a fan of music, freestyling obviously is being a cappella and learning how to put sentences together on the fly, whether you're on tempo or using a cadence. I did that a lot when I was a high schooler. I had friends who loved to freestyle, so that's what we would do. So it's cool to have that kind of background. But the big thing really is that to also understand that I would say 99% of commentators will freestyle and will say things that are not pre-thought of or pre-written 99.9% of the time. It's very rare, whether you're pulling up stats or when a game's starting, I'll think of something I want to say, or I'll think of a connecting bridge between two ideas that I'll say, okay, at some point in the game, should these two things happen, I will bring this back and use that. But it's very much like freestyling. And most of the time, I swear 99% of the time, we have no idea what we're going to say next because it's very dependent on the game. So if you want to get good at just speaking, number one, speak to a camera, because when a camera's on you, obviously some people feel like there's pressure, but if you can get comfortable with kind of acting at the camera and just thinking about you and the camera, you learn how to put the sentences together and you learn what to say. Number two, reading is massive. I've tried to work on my vocabulary and increasing my vocabulary and having a good background of information to be able to pull from, and, you know, like reading a dictionary and being able to pull words and know where to put them, that'll send you a long way. But really it's about just understanding that, like, it sounds dumb, but we're making everything we say up on the spot. And that's not a bad thing. But it's like when we're trying to hear things from production, the only time I get stifled from production is when they have to say something and then something goes wrong and they continue the sentence and then I have to hear it and I'm trying to fit my words in over their words, and it's very difficult. But most of the time you learn how to tune things out. So if production's telling you something, you either get the cue and you just put it in the top of your head and you wait to be able to bring it up. But what you'll learn is that most casters are very self-focused in the moment. They'll be listening to what other people say, but when I'm on a desk or when I'm casting, sometimes it sounds dumb, but like I'll be listening to what my co-caster is saying. Unless he makes an exquisite point that I absolutely have to touch on, most of the time I trust him enough to do his job. So I'll trust them all the time to do their job. But I'm sitting here like I know he's going to say exactly what needs to be said, and he's going to do his analysis. So it kind of goes in one ear and out the other. And then while he's doing that, I'm watching the game. I'm slightly listening to what he's saying or what she's saying. And then I'm thinking about 1 or 2 points. Do I have a bullet point? Yes or no that I can bring up? Have I passed the mark to be able to bring it up? Is it past like 10 seconds or so it doesn't matter anymore? Or what are the 1 or 2 things I can touch upon when he throws it back to me? And if I don't have anything, I just run. If I have something, I'll bring it up. But most of the time, whenever a commentator is casting, they are very much in their own bubble, thinking about what they're saying and just putting it out. And if it sounds good to us, it usually sounds good to the audience. So it's very much just about if you want to get into this and you want to figure out how do I get better at talking,
Right.
just get better at like talking to yourself. If you can talk to yourself and talk to a camera, you can talk to anyone, I think. So a lot of it very much is we are just kind of freestyling our way through this. Like, honestly, I never know what's going to happen. So it's stressful sometimes.
Okay. So in that vein right there, this is sort of the whole full circle way that you and I connected. You are technically the face of that event. So when somebody tunes in on Twitch or they show up in real time, they look right at you. And yes, they watch the screen and they watch the players a little, but whether it's COD or whether it's Rocket League, you are there. You're the person that they connect with the game. I remember very, very well my mom. When she was growing up, she grew up in St. Louis, and the guy who was the St. Louis Cardinals baseball announcer at the time was a Jack Buck, and so when my mom would listen to the St. Louis Cardinals on the radio, his voice became her friend, even though she she didn't meet the guy in real life, but she spent so many afternoons with him listening to the St. Louis Cardinals play. And so you are the voice of Rocket League for somebody in that moment. So it seems like everybody has an opinion on what you do, you know, like somebody who's a referee or an umpire. Everybody has an opinion on what you do when you're doing it. And they always say, well, you should have done this and you should have done that. So when you see that feedback on social media or somebody making some comment, either on the live cast or in a VOD, what's that like for you?
Oh, I think you bring up a really good point. It's very, and that kind of idea of like, you know, the announcer being like the face, like when, you know, your mom's tuning in, that's her connection to the game. So to kind of real quick to go back, one of the things when I first saw like Puckett and Ben was that it wasn't just that they were they were commentating and I knew I wanted to do that, but when they were starting, I knew I wanted to be in esports and I wanted to be connected to esports as an idea. And that's the commentators were connected to the idea of esports. And I was like, that's exactly what I want to do, because that is a connection. And I've always said that commentators are the conduit between the audience and the emotions on the screen. So we're not going to tell you the game, because you could see with your own 2 eyeballs, you know exactly what's happening. But our job, the best commentators are the ones you never know are there. And our job is to connect the emotions that the fans are feeling in the moment from the action on screen and deliver it in a way that they don't hear us, and that's a good thing, but we are speaking for them and possibly giving them information. So we are supposed to be the connecting bridge between the audience and the game. And it was very much when I first saw commentators, I was like, I want to be part of the esport and part of that atmosphere. And that's who the conduit is that they are the atmosphere and they are the ones who get the fans into that mindset. So yeah, I definitely wanted to touch on that, but sorry, I think I forgot your question. What was your question? I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, so it's
the comments. Right. The comments.
It's really easy for somebody to sit back. I spent 20 years as a fast pitch softball umpire. You know, I worked D1 fast pitch softball. I have seen the best players in the nation. I've traveled all over this country working fast pitch softball, and people still have a comment about my strike zone still. And I'm like, dude, you have no idea what you're even looking at. So when somebody, you know, tries to tell you, you're working RLCS, you're working COD, you're working this stuff up here. You're not down at the bottom starting out, you know, kind of struggling along. you're pretty much the guy that everybody wants to be. You know what I'm saying? And so when somebody makes that comment, like, "Ah, dude, what?" He says the dumbest stuff all the time. Be like, "Yeah, but you're not sitting in my seat right now." You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, definitely. No, it's I look, I think that it's yeah, like I think that we have professional egos that we all carry. Like it's not like I think ego one gets a kind of a bad rap because it's like, oh, they think they're high and mighty or above everyone else. But most of the time, most professionals you meet, whether it's players, staff, talent, production, regardless, like industry professionals, the business people behind the scenes, we all carry a professional ego that we have to have because
Right.
it is about being able to protect yourself, as silly as it sounds, from negative comments, stuff like that. But I think the big thing that I do is, number one, whenever I don't read Twitch chat when I'm working, that's a big cardinal sin in esports. Like if you're a commentator and if someone comes to me and says, yeah, I'm starting out casting and I read Twitch chat while I cast, I tell them you need to stop because it doesn't help you. It doesn't get you any better. And it literally only discourages you. I've learned that Twitch chat and Reddit are not really good teachers when it comes to criticism. So I take it with a grain of salt.
Okay.
But the big thing again is that I tell people to understand in general is commentators know when they mess up. Like we know in the moment, like I said, we are processing the sentences as they come out thinking, did that make sense? No. So I need to clarify it in the next sentence.
Right.
We know when we mess up. We know when we slip. We know when we say the wrong word. We know when we say the wrong name.
Right.
I've read team names wrong so many times just by accident because I'm thinking the right name, but the wrong one comes out.
Right.
And that's something I have to work on. But we know when we mess up. So yeah, it kind of sucks when people say like, oh, like, you know, this guy doesn't know anything about the game. And I'm like, dude, I'm working the game every weekend. I'm watching the pros. I'm reading the strats. I'm doing this, that. So I do. And there are some times where I clearly mess up and criticism is important. And someone telling you, yo, you messed up. You need to, like, you're a professional. You need to get it together. I'm like, that is fair, valid point, and I take it, and I will, you know, I'll fix it. So I try to give it, like, I'll be on Reddit sometimes, and if someone has a criticism, I'll be like, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll make sure to try to work on it and give you guys a better cast. But at the end of the day, again, I just try to kind of bring the point home that, like, look, we know when we mess up, we know what we have to work on, and most of the time, I try not to look at the comments because there's a lot of good comments, sure, but there's also a lot of bad ones. And I never view myself. I always want to be the worst possible caster in the room because the minute that I am the best caster in the room, I am not learning anything new. So whenever I'm working, I always want to make sure that I am working as if I don't know enough about the game. I don't know enough about what's going on. I want to make sure that everyone else around me is better because that pulls me up and that makes me work harder. But I generally and naturally walk around with the idea that I am not the best person in this room. So that continues to make me work hard. So if I see those negative comments, it doesn't bring me down from like a pedestal. It just kind of reinforces the idea that, okay, we're basically at bottom. I consider myself a net zero. These are the comments. Even if I think I had a good cast, I'm still down here. We'll just get back and we'll keep grinding. So I think that one, being able to contain any ego that you have, especially as a new talent, like until you're doing this as a tier one caster, until you're Golden Boy or you're literally like Henry G or your Puckett, there should be no ego here. You need to knock yourself down, and restabilize, and then continue forward. So don't look at the negative comments too much, but understand that if there is criticism there, take the criticism and run with it. But also continue to treat every day as if you are being criticized and work on that and continue to get better and better and better. So that way you give them less ammo. But just avoid the comments. Don't read Twitch chat. It has never been a good source of information for criticizing commentary. But yeah, I try to just stay as humble as possible because that makes my work better. So that's where I come from.
Awesome.
Essentially.
Spaceman, thank you very much for making time for this.
Sure.
This has been an awesome conversation.
Yeah, it was fun, man.
It's good stuff. Thank you for connecting with me. I try to connect with people outside of my sphere and provide good stories, and your story is a fantastic one. So if people wanted to connect with you more, I know that you're on Twitch, twitch.tv/Spaceman SR, right?
Yep.
I'm
there.
Yep. So we have twitch.tv/Spaceman SR. You also see on the overlay right there at Spaceman SR on Twitter. So kind of a quick wrap up. Is there anything else that you have coming up right now, sir?
We have some. We're getting to the point where Rocket League has some playoffs now. We are about to move into, I think, our first. It was supposed to be a LAN, but due to obviously the pandemic, we're doing like the online version.
Right.
And then after this split, we move into kind of an off season. Then January, Rocket League picks back up again. CDL should be announcing what they're doing soon. So it's a weird time. We're in the off season of a lot of esports. So just kind of, I'm staying tuned. I'm staying tuned with everybody else, and we'll see where it goes. But I'm looking forward to the rest of the year.
Awesome. Thank you very much for making time for me, Spaceman. Everyone,
No
please
problem.
like, share, subscribe to the YouTube channel. I try to do these more and more often. Thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you for tuning in today. You can find links to everyone on the show in the description below. Check out Bill the Conqueror on Twitch and Twitter to stay up to date on his thoughts and ideas about gaming culture.